Compound proof, you're going to have statements and reasons. Reasons are things over here. You would put like conjectures or definitions, things like that. Okay? Statements are just about the picture. So when you look at something like this, given that the given is WXYZ is a parallelogram, what that tells you is that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, because that's what a parallelogram definition is. Okay? You're trying to prove one of the properties. So you have to go through all the steps to show that. So I'm going to put down my first statement, which is just what I'm given, that WXYZ is a parallelogram. And I abbreviate parallelogram like this for the rest of the year, and you can too if you want, because it's a lot of writing. And my reason for that is that it was given to me, and that's a valid reason. You have to be given something to start with. Okay? The other things you can do is you can take from the picture a few things. You could always take from the picture that vertical angles are congruent and that a segment is equal to itself. Well, for starters. But once I have parallel lines, if you look at this homework problem, they asked you to verify all four of these things. Well, they are all parts of this one big proof. I'm trying to prove the opposite angles of this parallelogram are congruent. So what I really want to do is I want to prove triangle 1 is congruent to triangle 2. Because if the triangles are congruent, all the parts are congruent. So that's where I'm going. So like my thought process is I'm going to mark my picture up because I know it's a parallelogram. I know this angle is congruent to this angle. And then I also know, because this side is parallel to this side, I know that this angle is congruent to this angle. And it matters what side you're talking about. So the way I would write that is, since I have a parallelogram, I have two pairs of parallel sides, so I'm going to pick the ones I want to work with first. I'm going to work with the ones that are yellow. So I'm going to say that WZ is parallel to XY. And the reason is because a parallelogram has two pairs of parallel sides. So I can also say that, and I'm going to use color here, ZY is parallel to what? It's not that hard of a question. WX. Okay? For the same reason. So I'm going to put it in the same step. Okay? Does that make sense? So the result of the green step, the result of this, since WZ, which is right here, since this is parallel to this, I know that angle WZX is congruent to YXZ. And to make things easier, a lot of times you will see the angles numbered. Don't you number them, but the book will number them, or I'll number them. Don't add numbers in, because everybody will add in different combinations and it's just hard to follow. Yeah. So do you see the green, this one right here? That tells me 3 and 4 are congruent. Can you see that? So because of this, I know that angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. And the reason is, since I have parallel lines, I know that tells me the alternate interior angles are congruent. And that's where you can do some abbreviating. But we'll agree on what abbreviating is legal for the class, because otherwise we'll have 17 different people abbreviating different ways. That's not going to happen. We're going to agree on abbreviations, and that's one that's pretty standard. So what comes from this one then? Yeah, Jade.
Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2.
Right, and why do I even care?
Because you only have to prove that the triangles are congruent, you need those angles, because you only have one side.
Right, my goal here, the goal, basically, to achieve that, I need to show the triangles are congruent by angle side angle because I'm going to use that. You see that? So when you look now, I've got a couple of pieces of this proof done. I have this congruent statement, and I have this congruent statement. I need three. I need a congruent statement for each initial. So I have the two angles. Does that make sense? Question?
Can I just make a statement, like if you're going to cheese be abbreviated CHC?
Sure. Next question.
For the side, did you say the triangles for a side?
Yeah, so the next step would be that, okay, so just to be clear, it might help, especially looking at, my work here, it might be hard to follow. It might help if I just put a couple of like divided lines in here. That all goes with this reason. And this all goes, these are the same types of things, so they go with one reason. But since I did this first, this should come first logically. This tells me this, and then the red one tells me angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So you want to always keep logical order. And so now I've got a reason there. So you can kind of see what goes with what, or I'm hoping you can. Can you see what goes with what? Like, do you see that the reason for these angles being congruent, the reason for these angles, this comes from this statement, but the reason for this is that parallel lines tell me. So I start with parallel lines, and it tells me that all interior angles are congruent. So there's almost like a pattern in a proof where you've got like whatever you have here usually comes from the step above. You know what I'm saying? So like, I can't talk about a parallelogram until I state I have one. Okay? So now I'm going to do what Max said, I can't remember, that I'm going to say now Zx is equal to itself. So that's something I can take from the drawing. Zx is congruent to Zx. And that's just called the same segment property. Some books call it the reflexive property. That's the old term, but your book just calls it the same segment property. I like that. This is obvious. And then what happens next? What do I have now? So I have another congruent statement here. So I have my third congruent statement. I have all the parts I need to do what? To say the triangles are congruent. Right. So now I can say the triangles are congruent, and that brings us to where this whole week. So now I can say triangle W. So basically I use this, and I use this, and now I'm showing that. So WZX is congruent to triangle YXZ. And what's the reason? Somebody else besides Jake. Come on, you guys. Caroline, what's the reason? I mean, Eveline.
The reason,
Why are the triangles congruent?
because, you have to go all the way back to the top and like explain everything.
No, we just explained everything.
Because, the two, the line, the, segments are the same, and the,
So what theorem supports it?
the, SAS.
Look at the picture. Not sure? sure? Amy, what do you think?
The angle side.
How come? Show her, explain her, explain to her.
Because they share a side, and then,
So look at the markings, there's the shared side.
and the angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent, and angle 3 and angle 4 are congruent.
Does that make sense? So we did all that work so we could say that. But instead of just writing it down on a worksheet, we're actually doing the proof. So now I've done that. So can I now, what was my goal? Jackson, what was the whole goal?
Prove that,
I mean, besides this little mini goal, what, yeah.
to prove that angle W is congruent to angle Y.
Right, I want to prove the opposite angles of a parallelogram are congruent. So why can I say that now? Why can I say now Y, angle Y is congruent to angle W? Yeah, what's the reason, Josh?
Because in 5 you said that the two triangles are congruent, and 6 things have to be the same to be congruent, including all the angles.
So we call that the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent theorem. And then that's the whole proof. Jake?
But if you want to be doing a proof and then something won't work.
Then I would say prove or disprove. Yeah. We do a little bit of that, but really in the beginning we focus on just proving. So you did more of that in your quiz. But if it's a disprove, you just move on. So it would start with prove or disprove. If it's not possible to prove, say cannot be determined. All right, so that may be something